Hi, I'm Alia, and welcome to another episode of Aligning Authenticity, where we talk about all things mental health. And today we have a guest who is Diyana.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we were just saying before this that she's normally the interviewer,
Yeah.
but in this, she's the interviewee.
Yes. The tables have turned, people. Learn more of what's to come.
Yeah. And in today's episode, we're going to be discussing a little bit more about your journey and a little bit about when it comes to ADHD and entrepreneurship. And I know you're also a mom now, but maybe we can hear a little bit more about what you've been up to these days.
Oh man, a lot. I've been okay. Well, to start off with, so my daughter just turned 2, so that's 2 years of motherhood and 2 years of not sleeping properly. So, from there, I'm trying to sort of like pick myself back up in terms of my health, my focusing a little bit more on myself, which is a bit nicer for a change because I feel like over the past couple of years I've sort of neglected that a little bit.
Yeah.
But apart from that, I've been working a lot. I MC events. I run Mamas Here, which I'm rebranding and launching very soon. So that's going to be incredibly exciting because the platform, as you know, I started it as like it's just a podcast where it's a safe space for moms to talk about their raw and unfiltered stories. But
Yeah.
then now we want to, make it like far bigger than that, where it's like, it's no longer just a podcast. We talk to moms on the street and just speak to them and learn more about them. And it's been so rewarding. Apart from that, trying to survive, braining, doing.
Yeah, it's like quite a few different life changes
Yeah.
in that sense, right? And now, because before I remember you were like the announcer and that was like quite a
Yes.
while back. And
Yeah.
now you're doing this MC thing. But aside from that, when it came to the podcast, I think that's how I actually saw you again on Instagram with
Yeah.
Mama's Here.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But like, how has it been also kind of like balancing it all, you would say?
Not incredibly easy, obviously. I mean, what does balance mean? Are we allowed to swear? By the way?
Okay, now.
Yeah. No, but no, I mean, honestly, like I've in terms of trying to balance it, I think now it's the time where I'm trying to figure out what the right balance is, to be completely honest, because when you want to do so many things and you want to achieve so many things, I think the common factor right now for everything is doing it at the right pace at the right
Yeah.
time. I'm not trying to achieve everything in one go, but with great help. Like I do have a fantastic support system. I won't deny that whatsoever, because we have my nanny, who I absolutely love. Shout out to Katmina all the time. Like, I love you, Katmina. But like, it's balance that I am trying to achieve at this point of time is it comes with help, but it's me asking for help lah, and it's me admitting certain
Yeah.
things that I'm able and unable to do. Did
Yeah.
that conversation just get really deep really fast?
Well, welcome to how my podcast
Yes.
episodes tend to be. We went for this like mom circle, like
Yes.
Anissa, which was like amazing, and
Yes.
you shared a little bit
I did.
about ADHD. Love to hear a little bit more about the support system, or what are all of these things that have worked for you, right?
Yeah.
Because I think one of the biggest things that when it comes to ADHD, one is that okay, now we have so much more mental health awareness out there, right?
Yes.
There's all kinds of information
Yeah.
also. But there are also like there's this one sentiment basically on Instagram and Facebook, which you probably see, right? It's like if you have these symptoms, you have ADHD.
Yep.
You know? Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Stereotyping everyone on an Instagram reel.
Yeah, exactly. So, and still kind of keeping into consideration that everyone's experience is different. But how would you say your experience has also been with that? Like, let's start from your origin story
My
of
origin
like
story
ADHD.
back in the day, like, okay lah, I think if I were to go as far back as childhood, my a lot of my early memories is kind of a floating memory of
Right.
sorts.
Okay.
It's mostly by myself. I'm daydreaming somewhere. I'm noticing something that one would normally not notice. As an example, one of my vivid memories is like I used to live in PJ. The main gate is like on top of the hill, but it's not a very big hill lah. But
Yeah.
like as a child, it was a very big hill back in the good old days. And I remember that there was a spider web. There was a spider building a spider web, and it had just finished raining, and the sun was reflecting it, and it was just like so beautiful, like diamonds. And I was like looking back at all my friends and comparing and contrasting what their memories were. Mine was so like I'm not gonna say it's so unique, it's different than anyone else,
But it's
something
unconventional. Yeah.
it is something that not a lot of people would say that they
Yeah.
remembered, like, because it's such a in your own head kind of moment and feeling, right? But I think even in school, I was never really there per se. Like, I mean, to be fair, I mean, like, okay, I'm just gonna say it straight out. I was never really that studious to begin with. I didn't really like school. I didn't go very often either. But I did have strengths that I knew that I flourished in. I did very well in art. I would hyper focus on that. There were a lot of different skill sets that I knew I was definitely good at. Not
Yeah.
to say that I was completely like I wouldn't use the word useless, but like just I didn't fit in that mold of being that straight A student or B student. I'm
Right.
like maybe C's and B's sometimes kind of situation. And I got by in school, but that's the thing, I never really knew what my interest was for the longest time as well.
Right.
And I think journeying onto life, I just lived and went with the flow and thought like, hey, any opportunities that came my way, and a lot of things did, which I was very, very grateful for. But I think for the longest time, because of that, I never really knew what my direction was. And I find that when that happened, I kept falling in a certain kind of loop.
Right.
And that loop is maybe every once in 2 years, I'd have this really deep dive down to an abyss of uncertainty, and whether you want to call it depression or not, but it takes a long time for me to get out of that. So that was how the beginning part happened. Do you want me to continue on?
Okay, wait, hold on. One of the words that you mentioned that stood out to me was about the hyper focus, along with whatever that we kind of know, or what is the common perception of like ADHD. It's like, that you're always distracted all the time, right?
Yeah.
Because like maybe a butterfly flies by and that's all like you focus on and stuff. But that's one of the very interesting strengths that I would say happens when it comes to ADHD, because one is hyper focus, the other one is exactly like what you have said in that memory that you had, where there's a bit more of that creativity, that unconventional part of it. When we were talking just briefly about this right before this episode, was where we were saying how it can be a nature versus nurture sort of situation.
Yeah.
So perhaps for you in that sense was where you got by, and it was still kind of like an enjoyable sort of process at that time.
Yes.
A little bit. Like I remember you back in
daydream a
school.
lot. Yeah, I got to daydream a lot. Back then it's like they're like, hey, Diyana came to school today. Wow. And then, so I'm just like sort of floating around, looking around at everyone like, hi guys, what you doing? I look like I just woke up every single time.
Legit, like I remember back then. I mean, I didn't see you often because sometimes you were like at different campuses. But I remember times I saw you, you were always happy, babe. You were always
Yeah, lah.
looking-
Okay, lah. You caught me at the right time, lah. Most of the time when I'm actually in school to study, I'm usually just woken up. Especially we used to have like really good nasi lemak in the morning. That's it.
Yeah. So, but ADHD, especially when it comes to men, compared to women, or in boys also, it's much more easily kind of like detected at the start, right? Because it manifests differently, So maybe in your experience, right, it was more of, for example, certain daydreaming or certain focusing also really hard at some moments. But were there certain things that you felt like, now it makes sense?
If I look back in my school years, it would have been the way that I learned things. I still I mean, I haven't fully found the right learning technique, but the thing is, from my knowledge of what I have read and understood from certain people who are neurodivergent, in any spectrum whatsoever, everyone has a very different way of learning and how they can apply, whatever it is that they need, the tools that they need to apply, whatever they need to apply. But in school, I noticed that I found it relatively difficult to learn mathematics, for example. I never really understood it per se. Like I tried and I tried really, really hard because I sat in for so many tuition, and like bless my teacher's heart. Like I love her to bits. She's like one of the coolest teachers that I've had, okay? Where she would come to my house, we sit down.
Yeah.
She taught me biology, which was somehow easier to remember, obviously, because she managed to tell it in a storytelling way.
Yeah,
But
right.
how do you tell a story about mathematics? When 1 + 1 is 2. It's like, how do you put that together? So it's just about practice. And like, it was crazy because in class, I can continue to do the same exercise again and again and again. But come exam moment, I can completely forget everything.
Right.
And I realized something, now, more now so than ever. Back then in school for my exams, you know how you get you get your full points when in paper 2 mathematics, kertas 2 kalau siapa yang ingat benda ni, kertas 2 mathematics is not the objective one, it's the subjective one where you have to write all your answers. So you have the question, you have the space for you to fill up how you do your equation, and then last but not least, you have the answer at the bottom, right? Somehow or other, I did not write the equation, I wrote the answer. Not to say that I can do it without, but I would write the equation on another piece of paper, but I would not put it on the paper. I didn't know why. I never understood why. And sometimes obviously because I couldn't like for the life of me figure out what it is, I'm just teka-teki that I just like just insert a random answer like what is the
Let's
lowest,
hope
like,
this
let's
works.
hope it's 4. Satu markah. Yes. 4, like amazing. I got this, right? In university when I studied art, that was one of my biggest struggles. It was the work process, the thought process. Say you want to pitch something, you want to showcase your art, you want to showcase your work. I realized a lot of people could not follow how do I get to that point of in a conclusion where this is something that needs to be done. Like, so I can come up to you and present to you a grand idea. They'll be like, where did that come from? What's the foundation behind it? Why did you come up with this? And I couldn't bring them with me on that journey because in my head, I'm already 25 steps ahead.
Right.
To coming up with a conclusion. And that's one of the things that I realized over the years, that it wasn't just about the not paying attention part, but it was that I could not explain my thought process. That a lot of people somehow, I felt anyway, could not understand me.
Right.
Yeah. So it was, that was quite frustrating.
Yeah.
To be honest, like especially when it came to conversations with my siblings, my family members, like they didn't understand why I was so emotional. It was because in the reality of it, I'm like internally thinking about all those things and I've justified everything in my head. But when actually chatting with people, they were more like, where did this come from?
Right.
What's with the outburst? You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's so interesting because even in a professional capacity, like for example with Mama's Here's podcast and all these different things that you're doing, is that you still need some level of structure to it, right? After step 1, then step 2, step 3, step 4. Do you think that might have came in a bit more or come into a bit more once you got yourself diagnosed or?
I think it came to me more as I got older. I think when I would say it came to me after SPM when I realized how much I enjoyed structure. My first job was working in a call center. One of the things I loved about it was the whole process. I absolutely adored it. I mean, if I had it my way, I'd still do a part-time job as in a call center. I legitimately, genuinely love it. Back in the day, the way that it was, not now where you have to wait for like 15 minutes before you actually talk to a human being. But basically like the process of the training. So you go in with training and then you're like preparing yourself, and then after that you go into the workforce and you have your system where you key in things and everything has a place and everything is organized, that all you need to do is just look at that screen or look, and if you feel confused, look at your guidebook and you're good to go. Like this is simple. It just becomes like that. And I didn't realize how much I love that up until that point. And I realized the reason why a lot of things didn't end up really working out for me was because of the lack of structure. Unfortunately, but fortunately, like I need a structure. It's difficult for me to work independently, but like that's where I'm trying to create that for myself right now, to create that sense of structure, but internally a template for myself on how I operate.
No, for sure, man. Like, I think that especially when you are an entrepreneur, right? Like you're doing a lot of these different things. Like I know I'm so new to the game. To say yes, yeah, but and then we have to do everything ourselves.
Yeah,
sounds
designer,
fancy.
And the host, and the editor, and the
Customer
this,
service
investor. Yes,
specialist.
exactly.
And it's even harder, I think, sometimes when it comes to entrepreneurship because you're not too sure what happens next or what are some of the opportunities that come in or so, right?
Yeah.
So after having that experience of enjoying that structure and now being in something that's totally unstructured, how are you doing
Oh my
it?
gosh.
How are you adjusting?
No, I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy, guys. Like, oh my gosh. Yeah, well, so after working with customer service, I went back to college. I did art. I studied I did my foundation course in art, and then I did my first year degree in graphic design and illustration. Love art, hated it so hard. It's good because they created the environment to make it like as if you are in an office where you meet clients, you pretend to meet clients, the students pretend to be clients, where they again and when you present the work they'll tell you yes or no, whatever. But again, there was that kick in the nuts for me where it was always like, I don't understand your concept of your work, of your art, because they couldn't follow that thought process, which made me feel like, well, that's really rubbish. When in my head I thought it's a genius idea, but in the reality of it, they're like, nope, it doesn't work. And I'm like, what? Okay, so I think from that point, it kind of made me feel like kind of meh about it, and then failed my first year. I'll be completely honest with that. My parents asked me if I wanted to continue studying. I said, you know what? Like, I feel at this point of time, I'm so demotivated by my studies, by studying in general. I don't know my structure. I don't know my plan. I'd rather not waste your money. I'd rather go home and work. And so that's what happened. I went back to KL. I started doing a bunch of things. I did a baking business. I worked on I worked in a travel agency for a brief stint of time. I started teaching as well, like, and those things were fun because it was like, that was really when I started enjoying that sense of independence for myself rather than working for someone. You have to answer to someone by showing up for work, but how you do your work is a different thing. As long as you get the job done, you get it done. So I was like, okay, so I like that. Over time, I still realized that I would have that dip every once in 2 years where I feel like so demotivated not to do work and whatnot. And then tiba-tiba, like, in 2014, my friends and I, we sort of experienced like a sense of mortality shift lah. Like, it was a good friend of ours passed away, and at that point for me, I really felt like, oh my God, like, we're 20 something, we're in our early 20s, like, someone's already passed away, like, how is that? Life is too short. And existential crisis, and that's all what I'm about. I'm about the existential crisisism, okay? Like,
go big.
Go big or go home. You want to talk about death? Come to me, I will embrace that.
We have gotten deep so fast, but I love it. I love the journey. Let's go.
Align in authenticity, my most authentic self. But so we just sort of like reflected a little bit, and I had realized that I had so many things that I wanted to do, but I never got around to doing. And because of that, it made me feel as though I was not fulfilling life, like not living life to the fullest. That niyat, that intention as to why you do what you do, because ultimately, when you do stuff, you can achieve so many things. And by that point, I mean, like, I think at the tender age of 23, I had worked as a teacher. I was, I had a baking business. I worked in this other company, this and that and whatever. And all things considered, I had done quite a fair amount. And at that point, my friends were still in college and university as well. So I felt like I didn't want to do things for the sake of doing it. It had to have a meaning. So I did a lot of self-reflection on that. And then that was when I started to realize that I had goals, that I had some things that I actually wanted to try to achieve. And from that was the shift of how the outlook of life became, where the once in 2 years dip did not happen as much as it did before.
And was that around the time that you decided to go for the diagnosis of?
No, actually, the diagnosis was just a couple of years ago. Funny enough, it's a journey towards understanding myself
for sure
a lot more, and that sense of awareness had gotten me this far, which I'm very appreciative of. I actually applied for radio during that point of time, which I got, yay! actually. And like, I had been doing that, and then I started emceeing, and I started hosting. That's where it all started to open up. And those were really, really great opportunities and, wonderful experiences. But I felt that it became a loop in its own way after a few years. Not because I felt like I reached the ceiling. It was just more towards, did I actually achieve my intentions? Am I the person that can genuinely help another person?
Right.
Am I the person that genuinely inspires another to make them feel good about themselves? Did I achieve those things?
Yeah.
And you can ask anyone when you put yourself out there, like yourself, when you have to put yourself out there as a brand. Sometimes it's very tricky when you have to ask yourself, am I doing this because I really want to do it for sure? Or like, as in because I really want to help another person? Or has this become a shock scenery thing?
All right.
And I'm very particular about that factor.
Yeah.
So ultimately from there, my ADHD started manifesting in other ways as opposed to my job.
Okay.
That's where it's like a whole different ball game. It's like, this is adult ADHD. You're a functioning adult. You make money. You can do whatever you want, but now your life just sucks.
Yeah. That's the difference between how it can manifest or at least when it starts getting detected for men versus women. Like women, it tends to happen a bit later in life.
Yeah.
So whether that's because you've gone through some major kind of like personal tectonic shifts, maybe it's a deep relationship or marriage or even some work issues or motherhood in that sense, you know. So but for guys or boys, because it comes out as like a certain kind of behavior, right? It might be a bit more aggressive, so it becomes a bit more obvious early on, and they know how to get tested. So so for you, it sounds like it was a bit more of this spiritual, mental, and also emotional journey. Do you think that there has been that difference? Like, let's say when you're trying to get out of that loop, or tada, all right, we go and get ourselves
like must
diagnosed.
get checked, must get diagnosed. Okay, well, I started to notice that I had more anxiety and panic attacks more frequently. I realized my brain sounded louder than it normally does. It's like there's the federal highway in my head at this point of time, but there's always cars moving. But then when it's really bad, it gets louder and louder, and you become disassociated and everything. And I started to notice that I was very disconnected. There's a disassociation for a lot of things. And I realized it more when I had met a friend on a Monday, and I saw them on Wednesday, and I was like, I haven't seen you in a while. And they're like, I just saw you on Monday, and I was like, wait, what? Like, I completely forgot what day or time it was, and I started to realize that I would forget things, and I would like, it was just, I looked at the calendar and I'm like, it's all gray to me right now. I don't even know what's happening. So I think that was the first time I went to see a psychiatrist to sort of like really let a lot of things out. And to be fair, I did go through quite a traumatic experience. I'm not going to dive into detail in regards to that, but it was one of those things where you had to go see someone and talk about it. So I went to see my psychiatrist for the first time around, and funnily enough, when I entered the first time, he was like, hi, how can I help you? And I said, okay, so I've got problems that I want to talk about. You can feel free to diagnose me, but do not tell me what it is. Simply because I did not want to take medication. And I knew that for whatever reason, the medication will always be offered to me because it's kind of like how every time you're not chill, someone passes you something and say, why don't you just chill out a tiny bit, right?
Or even like, or go clinic confirm. You don't just leave with consultation, right?
Exactly.
You will get a few meds.
Naturally.
I think it's just the way society functions.
Yeah, pretty much. So, but this time around, I was like, because I was very adamant, I don't know whether it was deep-seated stigma or like whether I felt like I think it's also to do a self-confidence thing, because it's almost as if you take medication for something, it means you have failed. You are incapable of controlling your mind. You're incapable of controlling your body. And that was, I don't regret making that decision, to be fair. The only thing I might have regretted was not finding out sooner. But again, in that state that I was in, I might have not taken the news of being ADHD the same way that I did now, because I might have not been prepared for it. I might have used it as a crutch to say like, here's an excuse, I'm not doing well because I have ADHD and stuff like that. You know what the feeling, right? I mean, I'm sure you go through that same scenario where some of your, when you talk to some of your clients.
That's why I find your experience also very interesting, because that the way that you have went about it, you've been very on the ball of like self-awareness and learning. You're right. There are a few different experiences in that sense. One of it is where they might use it as a crutch.
Yeah.
They feel that, oh, that is what limits them from pushing themselves forward or so. Or some of them, I don't want to get myself checked because of the taboo, the taboo that's there. They worry that it will really shift their lives. So, which is very interesting to me, because I actually know quite a lot of successful people with conditions, and it's not meant to be a limiting factor. What you said about meds, there's so many different routes to it, right? With how society has been, we think that, okay, you take a med and everything's solved, right? Tada, magic pill, you know? In reality, it's not the end all be all. No. You have all these different other things that have come into the picture.
Absolutely. You know? Couldn't agree more. It's a holistic approach altogether. And I think like there was that part of me that wanted to give that a try as well, because if I had the medication, it's like it's a fast route to something, and I've got a very addictive personality. Like, I'm the kind of person who's like, if we eat nasi lemak today, I'll eat nasi lemak every day for the next 10 days.
Right.
Legitimately, you know, like, and that's where that's how it all starts.
But in a better mental space, you remember all those 10 days.
Yeah, you know, but it's always a self-loathing afterwards where you're like, alamak, I've gained so much weight. Like, when did that happen? Nasi lemak 10 days in a row, man. But like, in all seriousness though, like, that's my proud achievement when it came to like this journey of really listening to your body lah. I think that was one of the things that I had made a point to do. If I don't take medication, I have to keep myself in check all the damn time. And it comes to the extent where if you are feeling an inkling of like macam tak sedap hati and all of that, you got to take note. You have to say something to someone. You have to like really put it out there that you're just like, I'm not in the right mental space for this. And you have to draw your own boundaries. And I think in that sense, it set a pretty good relationship with myself. Like I started building that for me, and I appreciated that for myself. But it would come and go lah. Like, you know, once I, you know, let it all out, had a good cry, think about life, spiritual journey, la di da di da, eat well, have your supplements and la di da. Like, those things definitely does make a shift, but it comes back to you every now and then. You can't always expect it to go up, up, up. You know, you're bound to. Life
Plus
is like a
women.
Yes. Life is loopy. I heard now
monthly is already a different journey.
Monthly was bad enough. But now turns out at 36 there's such a thing as perimenopause. Like, what the heck? You know, like, can you give me a break? Like,
the news just keeps coming, right?
Oh, it's just like, wow, isn't it fantastic to be a woman? So
a lot of people also, they don't really realize the amount of courage and consistency that actually comes with that, you know? And it's very interesting what you mentioned about the need of structure, and then there's also wanting to get things completely right. Would you say that perfectionism is also a part of that equation?
Hey guys, I haven't done anything with Mama's Here in a really long time because I've been a perfectionist. There's play in nurture and nature. Nurture wise, like, I love the matriarchs of my family. And they have this wonderful ability to, you know, really bring everything together as much as they can, put their heart and soul into something. But it comes to the, like, extent where it has to be right and it has to be, you know, precise. It's more like for your own satisfaction. You want to look at something and be like, I've made this. I'm done, and I'm very penat tapi puas, you know. But at the end of the day, when you translate it to everything else, it slows you down for a lot of things, and that's partially why I have that list of things where I say I always wanted to do but never got around to doing. So after having been diagnosed and becoming a mom, there's one thing about motherhood that changed me, was that I see time a very different way, and I'm sure you do too. Time exists like this much. There's this much of time, right? There's this much of time. Half of it is for your kid, and the other half is for whatever the heck you need to do. And because it's the other half is allocated for that, you have to pick and choose the right thing at that right moment. So in terms of like you wanting to achieve everything, go for it. Like, you can do whatever you want, but you don't have to do it all in one go. Take your time to pick and choose what needs to be done first. Prioritizing the right thing for you, that's suited for you then and there.
Definitely a lot of truth to that. Because I think with the kind of culture out there, people who are saying that, oh, women, you can have it all at the same time. I hit that point actually. Some part in corporate, it was probably a few years into motherhood, right? I realized that no one's saying that you cannot have everything, but to have it all at the exact same time,
You're asking for
you
it,
know,
bruh.
like no way, not without running yourself into the ground. You
Yeah.
know, it's just not really that possible.
Absolutely.
You know, and I found that truth to be very liberating. Like the kind of narratives that you might be telling yourself as a mother or a wife or a daughter or so, it's like thinking that you can do it all at the same time. Man, that is like the fastest way to burn out, I would say.
absolutely.
And imposter syndrome shooting through the roof. You know?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
you know, it's worse when you have ADHD because so there's this one YouTuber, Jessica McCabe. I never know how to pronounce her last name, but she has this book called How to ADHD, and I followed her channel since I got diagnosed,
Right.
actually.
Yeah.
And she basically explained what ADHD or how ADHD works in layman terms. There's the cup and the dopamine and like how neurotypical brains work, la-di-da. So essentially for neurotypical brains, imagine that you have a cup or a bucket and you have your brain producing your dopamine. And for neurotypical people, the dopamine will fill up in that bucket and will, continue to fill up.
Yeah.
But as you use your dopamine for neurotypical people, it will go down slowly, but at the same time your brain will still produce enough dopamine to keep you consistently either happy, motivated, etc. But then for those who are neurodivergent, who has ADHD, it's almost as if you have a hole in that bucket. So if you have a hole in that bucket, not only will you have a whole amount of dopamine that's like exiting your body, which is like, or your brain, or that's just going to waste and saying bye-bye, but it'll take a longer time for it to fill up again for you to feel that motivation. So it's easier for you to get burnout, and that's why, especially when you hyper focus even more, you're like overly using every aspect of your brain, and then after that you're like done and tired and whatnot. And honestly, I've come to that extent where I've had enough of that. Like, for example, for mamas here, I'm gonna be so honest about it. Like the experience was so liberating because there was so much that I wanted to put my heart and soul into and put out there for people to connect and relate to. But that particular period of time, there was so much effort and energy being put into it in one shot. It just went like, it's wanting everything at one go.
Yeah.
And because of that, I certainly felt like a sense of burnout. I certainly felt like there was just so much where it was exhausting. And not that I hated it, but coming back from it would made me realize like I can't do that again.
It's kind of like the different approaches that you take when you're doing a sprint versus a marathon. Right? And I bet like, when you're doing events and stuff, it's more of a sprint, right?
Yes.
All in, boom,
and then
go ahead, right?
Yeah.
But for building something that you're so passionate about with mamas here, and I've seen the work, like it's great.
Yes.
It's great stuff. I'm sure that's more of a marathon, babe. Like,
Obviously, I'm not only doing it one time.
here, So like, but how does it look like now, as in terms of like your day, right?
I think my
balancing
day,
stuff.
I think in my day, it really depends on the situation. And then, you look at the whole, how much time do you want to allocate for what? And I also noticed, memang it was true when, albeit my daughter was a lot younger. I'm not a lot younger when I started Mamas Here, but it was different. She was a lot less aware of my whereabouts. She didn't need me as much. She's terrible too. So what do you expect, right? So now I even like emceeing jobs over the weekend. Like there is a shift in her that I know I have to be a lot more present, which means I definitely have to divide my time properly. But now it's also bouncing off the ideas with someone, finding the right people to work with, and finding the right structure and like creating that right structure for myself. That's what it's looking like at the moment. There's still that sense of perfectionism in me. I'm trying to slowly let go of that and just go and do as much as I could. If I fail, pivot. I have to keep telling myself, like, if I fail, stop and pivot. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. You put your heart and soul into something. You want to make sure that it is the best that you can possibly give. And I think in a psychological manner, like growing up, my parents had always told me, you can be anything you want, but you have to make sure that you do the best that you can. Well, my dad said it more lah. And I think for the longest time, this is me overcompensating because I never really did my best before. Because I never had any direction per se. And
there was less structure.
There was
sense,
it wasn't there was less structure, but it was because there was not enough drive in it. There was not enough love in it. Now that there is, and you really want to do something correctly, it's come to the point where you better freaking do it, you know, because
Yeah.
if not, you're just gonna sit on it wondering when is it gonna be perfect for you to launch. So yeah.
Such a great point, because when we are going through these different stages, and definitely motherhood is a very big impact, right?
Yeah.
It involves a lot of unlearning, relearning different things, right? So it sounds like that's the journey that you're on right now. Like as in, and that is also like driven by the drive and the love, right? What would you say are some of the advice, or let's say top 3 tips that you give to women or so, who, you know, they might be on a similar journey as you, or maybe they have just found out,
Yeah.
or they are not even sure about whether they want to get themselves diagnosed.
Starting step is if you feel like there's an inkling that there might be something lah. That's always the start lah. When the sense of self-realization, there's something wrong that needs to be done. I got to get out of this cycle. By doing so, seek out for help. Seeking out for help means either talking to family members, close friends, or going to professional help, whether you see a counselor who can recommend and see. If you feel like you want levels of assessments prior to going to a psychiatrist, because there is that fear of like, what is wrong with me? Because trust me on this, like, it was really sucky that years back I had like heart palpitations, and I genuinely thought it was a heart condition. I went to the doctor and I had an ECG test and everything, right? And he asked me, do you have any like family like conditions, I say, yeah lah, you know, like heart issues like from like, you know, ancestors, whatever. And then after that he was like, what about mental health? And I was like, what about your mental health? And I was like, he went far deep. So deep. No, straight up. No, he went straight up. And then after that, I was like, why would you ask me that question? And he was like, because your heart is fine. I have had like anxieties, panic attacks and everything. And he was like, I'm sorry to say it, your heart's okay, but it's just that. It's a mental thing. And that made me break down so much, because I felt like such a failure to my body. I felt like how can I allow what's going on in my head to transpire and like manifest itself to make me feel and think that there's something wrong with me physically like that. And I think
and I'm sure back in the day, right?
Yeah.
It's a very different perspective. Like when you hear something like that, especially with the stigma, the taboo, right? It feels more like, wow, something mental or something really wrong with me, right?
Yeah, but this is new-ish age era. This was not very long ago, possibly just before COVID when that happened. And finding the right kind of help is so crucial. Once you find that help, the part 2 of it is really get deep and get to know yourself.
For sure.
Really set that boundary for yourself where you're like, this is my territory right now. Connect the dots from the past, because that changes the narrative completely. Where you start to realize that, oh, it makes sense now. Oh, it's not me that has a problem. This is the condition that I have. And therefore, now, part 3, I can do something about it. When I got diagnosed first time around, I didn't believe it. I actually didn't believe it. It's okay. In denial.
It happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
But then, so I sent it over to my sister, like this link, and then she read it, and then she was like, that makes perfect sense. And I started to look back and everything. I felt as though like, so I wish I knew sooner. But the reason why I said that was because I was ready and prepared to get out of that cycle, that rut, that constant loop of the same thing again and again. I wanted to find the resources that would help me. I wanted to be...
You're more also open to
yes,
it, right?
and a sense of self-improvement, genuine self-improvement. And that takes a lot, because you'd come through positions and situations where if you put yourself out there about being ADHD, if you have a diagnosis and you're afraid to share it with someone because you think that they're going to use it against you, then you are looking at your diagnosis as a weakness. People can only use something about your life as a weakness, as a tool against you, if you allow it to be that way.
Yeah.
ADHD can be a superpower. Autism can be a superpower. Any neurodivergent like diagnosis can be a superpower, but the only way for it to be a superpower is to know how to hone it. So finding the right tools that work for you is ultimately the way to go. However way your journey is going to be, like, it's that lah.
That's very profound. when you're looking at any of the Marvel movies,
Yeah,
superhero
yeah,
movies.
yes.
That's where the origin stories come from. It's like you're finding out a bit more about yourself.
Yes.
And then you decide what you do after that. That's also what allows that power to really kick in, right?
Yep.
Rather than, if you're hiding away from it or so. But having said that, I do know a lot of people, and this was even before my own journey into this mental health profession. You can't blame them necessarily because they have had certain situations where, like, for example, one or two of them, it's like when they say, okay, they have ADHD, they have anxiety attacks or whatnot. It's what society also says. You think that some of these people are more woke, right? But they will still say things like, oh, but because you have this condition, maybe you're not someone I want to marry. You're not someone that I want to have as the mother of my kids or the father of my kids or so. It was only when I became more attuned with mental health, learning more about it, I realized that, look, everyone has different flavors, man. I was in like, different flavors. As long as you know how to go about it, that's fine. What would you say or help encourage some of these people to own that narrative, you think?
Well, I mean, you know what? I think the only way is for you to be sure of yourself. Like, if you are unsure of yourself and you have like a diagnosis, it's harder to navigate because you're not really sure what's right for you, what's wrong for you. You allow outside noise to get into your head
For sure.
and into your space. And when that happens, that's where you F it up real hard. Your self-esteem will drop so much that coming back out of it, it shifts you as a person. You either become way too careful, you don't trust people anymore, and this and that. Like, there's so many outcomes
so
to
many
it.
iterations of it, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So I think in that sense, it's like the owning it part is basically just take that moment to get to know yourself. Society will always be there to say things to you, whether they are encouraging or not encouraging at the end of the day. But this is your space. This is you. You have to allow yourself to be a little bit selfish in your little bubble to really get to know yourself. Get to know who you are as a core of a person. What is it that you want to do? What is your intention? What superpower do you have? What weakness do you have? And how do you work on that? And affirm that for yourself. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, when you listen to someone else telling you what you are or what you're not, it is so limiting, it is so demotivating, and you get to that point of ultimate loss. Like you're lost in the woods because you really can't navigate to who you are as a person, that you reach out to the things that you do as your identity of who you are. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you believe what the world tells you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's just easier, or like you're just trying to cling on to
something
like,
that, because like ultimately, if you don't know yourself at the foundation, you won't be able to proceed. The logo for Mama's here. It's basically like it's a chat box with different layers on it. The reason why it's like that is because as a person, how do you define yourself? When you introduce yourself to a person, the first thing you say, hi, I'm Diyana, it's your name, you shake your hand and whatever. But like, if someone were to ask you to introduce yourself further, what would you say? I do my
freeze first.
Yeah,
from which aspect?
Yes, exactly.
Like
Exactly. So you have to think about the aspects of what you want to talk about. Where am I from? I'm from KL. Or what do you do for a living? I do this or this and that, whatever. So but you always pick something that you do, like your job or your hobbies or your location of where you are from. But that does not define who you are as a person. Oh, sorry, I'm like deep. I told you this conversation is going to be that.
I have something to add on to that, but up to you.
Yeah, so all of this, like, so say this is you, right? Like the ultimate foundation. So who you are, what you do, this, I mean, like, so, and then like the jobs that you like, the people that you hang out with, you are all these layers. But when you become a mother, you have more layers because it adds into like the different roles that you play, the different things, the emotions and everything that you add on. So the point of the Mama's Here logo was to basically unlayer those things to be able to really
peel like an onion.
Yeah, peel like an onion, man. Rediscover yourself. And that is the only way to do it. You just gotta go to the core and like pick that out. I got you.
I think why people say that also, what I do instead of who I am or
Yeah,
whatever. Or
yeah.
there will sometimes be that one random person who's like, I am, and then they say what they are, and everyone starts looking at them like, wow, you're really woo-woo, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah, 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 yeah,
you
yeah.
must have just come back
Yeah.
from some mountain or
Yeah.
whatever.
So I
Some
appreciate-
retreat in Bali,
Like,
you know?
I'm happy for your peace. I'm happy you found your peace. Good for you. Good for you.
It's not a common flavor you get, you know?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, to get to that point of self-awareness, that's also what some people really struggle with,
Yeah.
especially if they don't spend that time to reflect.
Yeah.
And you also lack the courage and consistency, right? One of the other things that can help, and I'm wondering whether that's the same for you also, is where maybe you don't know at that time what you want, right? But maybe you know what you don't want. You know, that pain or whatever, that loop that you've been through, right?
Yeah.
That was the same for me.
Yeah.
So some bits, like if you ask me to plan my 5-year roadmap,
Yeah.
what it looks like, I still don't know.
Yes.
But at that point, at least when I know something needs to shift or I need to grow into a bit more of my own power, self-awareness or the self-confidence, is knowing first, what do I not want?
Yes.
And do I declutter from
Yeah.
that? Then I figure it out as I go along.
Yeah.
You know?
Boundaries.
Would you say that's the same for you?
Yes, boundaries. You gotta know it. You gotta you have to know. Okay, fun story. Like I decided to quit drinking. Like essentially, right? So, disclaimer: I used to drink. Don't judge me. Whatever. I stopped doing it. But anyways, so back in the good old days, right? I used to hang out with these group of friends. I hung out with them like almost every weekend. But it was the same thing again and again and again. And the thing is, it wasn't that they were not nice people, but there was one night that I started to realize, let's go do something else. Let's go play golf. Let's go do something, a fun, healthy activity. And then within the chat group, there are 2 or 3 people who are like, what's the point? You're going to go back to doing whatever it is that we're going to do anyway and blah, 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 blah. I started to realize like this group of people, we were all avoiders and we were all in a loop, in our own loops. And there were some people that refused to want to get out of the loop, that they wanted to sort of like pull you back in no matter what.
Yeah. If not, no gang lah, babe.
Yeah, I mean, misery loves company. So, you know, it's just one of those situations. And from that point, I was like, you know what, I can take a step back and I can like actually get out of this cycle. And then that was, funnily enough, the time that I got diagnosed, when I started to realize, even when it comes to relationship with alcohol and like as a person with ADHD, alcohol and ADHD don't go well. Substance and ADHD just generally does not go well. So please do not start if you already like are like unaware of that. But either way is
No, but you know, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Right? Some things that we might know, but to really live it
Yes.
and see the
Yes.
feel, the essence, and the
Yes.
meaning of it is
Yes.
different. So that, power to you, man.
Yeah,
Listen
no, had to,
that.
had to. No other choice. I mean, because ultimately, at the end of the day, that's a lot of masking. Alcohol is a lot of masking. Any form of substances is a way to mask what you truly are feeling. My psychiatrist, one of the things I loved him for was basically to identify the fact that first and foremost, you have a problem. And I'm like, I will
Are
never
you ready to hear about your
I will
problem?
never part ways with alcohol, sir. No, sirree. But then that's when he actually said that, you know, why don't you shift the style this time around? Instead of not drinking, period, only drink when you are 100% happy. And I mean 100%, even if you have a 0.5%, 1% where you feel a little bit uneasy, uncomfortable or whatever, do not drink. I was like, fine, challenge accepted, right? And I started to realize what an anxious person that I was. For a person who seems so chill, actually has absolutely no chill whatsoever.
So you're like the smile and wave penguin lah in
Pretty much.
Madagascar.
Honey, I can make a life disaster sound so damn blasé. I can make it so casual that you macam, ya Allah, what happened? And you're just like, tak ada je, biasa je. Like, biasa je.
And they look at you with that
Sure.
disturbed
Like,
look on
macam
their
like, are you okay? And like, I'm fine. Yeah, so it's just like that, you know. But then that's where I started to really realize a lot more about myself, and I started to realize the triggers that happen and the things that really bothered me. And from that point, I actually stepped away from that group of friends. I abruptly just straight up went like, sorry guys, like I'm not gonna hang out anymore. Like years later, like when I had my daughter, after having my daughter for like I think by that point she was about 9 months or something, and I asked a friend who still hangs out with that group of friends, how are they? Same old, same thing. It was like a repeat, maybe slight improvement here and there, but that's as far as it gets. So really trying to be in the right environment where people try to like, you know, not necessarily lift you up, but at least say if you are planning on doing something, they just say good for you. They don't have to follow you. They don't have to be like, I'm your cheerleader, I'm gonna like, you know, encourage you like crazy and be there for you all the time kind of thing. But just for someone to be able to say like, oh great, good for you, you know, like that makes a difference already as it is. So being in that right environment is also one of the most helpful things. Yeah.
You know, it's also interesting because there might be certain things that we logically know, right? Like, okay, maybe you hang out with this group of people, or it's bad for you, or whatever, all that, right? But I think that when it comes down to it, for us to actually really just start doing something different, all you need is curiosity.
Yes.
You know, so it sounds like even when you're going through it, there was one point which you were just curious, whether it was the challenge from the psychiatrist, or even for yourself. It was more of getting curious and like, hey, I'll accept this challenge because like I'm curious to see what happens, you know, and then you just went forth from there.
Yes.
You know, why I'm highlighting it is because everyone thinks that it has to be this huge step or this huge plan, you know, and then that's what stops them from making that movement.
Yeah.
But it sounds that you just got curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a long time coming lah. You know, when you the glass has shattered and you already can't unsee what you have seen, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it was that like that slight shatter, and it just
Suddenly
slowly,
became
like,
in HD,
like,
you know?
and like everything started cracking. And you're like, oh no, this is what it is. Like now I know for a fact that I can't be part of this like kind of situation. I do have that part of me still where I'm avoiding some things. I'm not sure what I'm avoiding, but I know that I still am, because within my group of friends, we're all avoiders in our own ways. It's like that's somehow or rather what I've been attracting my entire life. I mean, like, please, if you're a non-avoider, come to me and be my friend. I need new like encouragement and like
Opposite problem. My husband tells me that, hey, you can calm down, you know? You don't need to just go to war about this one thing. I'm like,
glad
but we have to fix it.
Exactly.
You know?
I'm glad to have met you. I think you and I are going to be great friends. But that's essentially it. Like, but it becomes so sad when you see the people around you that are clearly in need of a shift, of a change. And they know it, but they're not ready. They say, I'm not ready for it. Have you ever experienced that where it's like...
Oh, yes, I have.
Yeah,
And I've heard so many stories of this also, right? They're like, this person knows they have a problem. And that comes from a place of care, right? My clients or participants, whatnot, or even in my own personal space, right? It's like you see someone there and you're just like, look, I think you should get help or at least talk to someone.
Yes.
And they just refuse, and the person themselves that's wanting to tell that, they have no idea how to like communicate that.
I think they're afraid that, you know, when you've held on to something for the longest time, you know, that if the bottle breaks, all hell breaks loose. You're opening a can of worms and it's just like non-stop crying from here on out, or like anger or fear or anything. And that is really sad lah. I know a few people who go through that, and even when they try to find that help, they're still so scared. Coming from your side, seeing the fact that I have free counts in front of me right now, in your perspective, right? Say you're going through a personal journey of wanting for self-improvement. When you see a friend who clearly has been in the rut for the longest time, and you just want to give an inkling of a brush to like, come on, nudge, get out of the door, like just try something new. How do you react as a person? Or like, because ultimately... the people who are watching this might say, I might not be in that position, but I know someone who is, and I've tried helping them. What would you recommend?
Okay, so there's two parts to this that I'll share, right? The first thing is, when people are in that part, it's kind of like they're in a hole or like a prison, right? And when you are in that prison for that long, and it's a dark, smelly prison, okay? And when they're in it for that long, they cannot even imagine, like if you were to tell them, hey, by the way, the sun is outside, the sky is outside, it looks this color, whatever, all of that. They can't even imagine it at that point, you know? So I think the first step of what you can actually do with it is to kind of get them to be a little bit curious. Sometimes it's to shift the energy. It doesn't have to be some monumental moment, but it can just be as simple as, hey, let's try doing something different. Try something else, you know, like go out for a different hobby or whatever. All that. That's one. And second, I think that where a lot of that pain comes from is when we see someone that's hurting like that, we get so emotionally invested in it. Like we think that it's our responsibility to save them, when sometimes it's not. Yes, you can be there for them and you can still make sure that the door is still slightly open. Because sometimes some people, right, when they keep going at it or they keep saying that, hey, I told you already how many times or whatever, they will shut off completely. They're like, you are obviously not changing. I must know my boundaries. So that's it. Bye-bye. Right? But it's not always that straightforward. So I would say have that space. When you're having the conversations or you're trying to help them in that sense, even if they reject that help, but you keep the door slightly open. Help is not just in one way, right? This is a example I share with some people, right? The way they go about the conversation, like let's say they see someone struggling with depression, they're like, do you think you should see someone? If you are that person, right, and someone tells you like that, are you going to take that message very positively? You'll be like, why? You think I'm crazy? Is it? I'm mental? Is it? Right? So I think it's also the way that we go about it. Like one of the ways that I actually recommend to people is that to share certain resources or even share certain stories. Like, hey, I heard of someone who had some of these different symptoms or whatnot. So you make it a bit more objective. That it's not like I'm telling you to go because there is obviously a problem with you. So that they're aware. So maybe at that point in time, they won't think about it so much. But in the future, like let's say for you, right, you had a few different iterations of maybe you went to see someone first, but you weren't ready yet to get that full on diagnosis, right? You had time. But what was also consistent in your story was where you had some avenues of where there were people there to help you. There are these different opportunities. Sometimes we are also the supporting characters of their story. We are just there to help give that support. Whether they take it or not, it's up to them. But whenever they do, we're still there.
It's like leave the door ajar and put some kibbles in case the cat wants to come back after roaming around the street.
And then maybe the cat has roamed about, decided not to come back yet. It's okay. Whenever you come back, fresh kibbles there for you, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And it helps, when you have that clear in your mind, because it's normally that when we get very, very frustrated, it's realizing that we just need to take a step back in that moment.
No, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think like that's one of the key factors that a lot of people experience as well, not coming from the neurodivergent aspect, but they are the neurotypical. They want to be the support system for other people. That was definitely one of the struggles that I had experienced for a period of time, when people are not sure how to help. And I think like that's where the concept of the person with the diagnosis has to really get to know themselves the best that they could, to be able to articulate what it is that they need, at least how to maneuver or manage when you have a breakdown. For example, when you're feeling very, very down. My husband, for the longest time, like when we were dating and stuff like that, I don't think he really understood it fully at the beginning, because generally guys would go for a solution basis. You have a problem, find a solution. That's as simple as. But during the point of time where I was not diagnosed and I didn't understand how or what I felt, in the first place does not help at all.
Oh my God, babe, that's a very real thing, right? Like some people will tell you, hey, why didn't you ask for the help you need? How you know at that time,
exactly,
right? How do you know exactly what you need?
Exactly. First and foremost, don't do anything alone lah. Like being alone, yes, some people say it might help, but having a presence of a person of comfort or love next to you without saying anything, without holding you or whatever, does make some kind of a difference. My husband eventually understood that it was not about giving a solution, but it was being part of the solution. So being part of the solution is, you're not alone. So I'll sit next to you. Let me just give you like a foot rub, or like rub your, massage your hand. I'll come and share ice cream with you, or chocolate. Have like chocolates help and stuff like that. So those little things actually does make a difference, and it grows your relationship with someone. And it's like what you said, when you feel like you want to shut off because you're afraid that people are going to tell you what to do rather than giving you the space to really listen, even when they don't understand, it also changes the ball game altogether, because that's where they will try to, because you have to understand, an ADHD brain, right? When you are very flustered in a floaty state, floating is one thing, but when you're very flustered, it's chaos inside. That finding the right words to actually say what you want to say becomes nearly impossible.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that when your mind is going at the rate that it does, like sounds like the federal highway and stuff, right? And then when you meet someone who is trying to make things all better quickly by giving you a solution, right? I bet among the first few instant reactions you might have with it is like, you thought I didn't think of it, is it?
Yeah,
Before
yeah.
I've thought about it already, you know? It's like you said, you just need that emotional presence or that physical presence, right?
Yep.
You don't really need the solutioning part. It's
Yep.
only like maybe later on or
Yeah.
so, right?
Yeah, that's very
Yeah.
true. That's very, very true. I think like that's the thing because so here's how my brain works and how I've deciphered it and how I turned it into my superpower essentially, right? So I've turned my brain into a blueprint. Essentially, that's one of the key factors when it comes to communicating as a person with ADHD. Your brain moves so much faster than your mouth.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's where you blurt out a lot of random crap. And then sometimes you're not even sure of what you're saying, or you don't have the right amount of time to even process what you're thinking. And before you realize it, you regret what you say or something like that.
Yeah.
It's taken a lot of training on my side to slow my brain down, which is
Yeah.
why it's like, bite the like hold on to dear life if you feel like interrupting a conversation. Like just continue to listen and slow your brain down, and you don't have to go too quickly to respond to a conversation. You have to slow your brain down as much as possible, because like from that point, that's where this is the superpower lah, where you be able to turn your brain into a mind map, because your brain is actually fast enough to start thinking of a lot of things,
For sure.
but you are slowing your brain down in order for you to get to the point of like understanding certain situations and instances. For example, scenario one in my head, yeah, exactly. True, macam it's like a spore branch, macam like poof 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 poof. So like scenario one happens, okay, this is what's happening, poof, there's 5 different ways for you to react or respond. Poof, there are 5 different like outcomes out of it, and then there's poof 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 poof, and it keeps on going, and then after that, if you think of it fast enough, you'll be able to decide like, okay, here's the route that I'm taking. So that's why your thought process becomes something that a lot of people don't understand, because you get from A to Z very fast.
Yeah.
They don't get that, but it can work your way if when it comes to communicating with people, for example, knowing for a fact that if you look at the outcome, like if you reacted rather than responded, you continue to follow the response route and you will see the outcome. And then true enough, it happens. Funnily enough, I've seen people with ADHD who has a tendency of saying that they're psychic. And I'm like, it's not you being psychic. You're just thinking far ahead of what are the potentials that could happen. But whether it works out to your favor or not is a different story lah. There is a way to hone that skill to be able to really like, you know, use your ADHD as an ability to think very, very quickly. If you don't have the ability to slow your brain down when you need to, because the being flustered, believe you me, there was a period of time where I was out with my husband and out of nowhere, it was so loud and like crazy inside my head. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine. I literally could not say words. Like I just blanked out and stopped, couldn't speak. And I just like held on to her like that, and I stepped away, and I just said to my husband, we need to go home now. And he was like, what's wrong? I was like, I'm not functioning. Like, and I'm panicking because of that, because I'm afraid that people might realize that my brain is blanking.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, it sucks when a person with ADHD, where you talk and then you lose your train of thought and you don't want people to realize that you've lost your train of thought. That freaking sucks.
I feel like that's 2 parts to that, right? As in, one is because in that moment when it gets too overwhelming, that's exactly how dissociation happened. Because in that moment, it's like, you know, like the computer, all that gets overloaded. And then
the rainbow circle of death.
It just like freezes there, like for a while, until it cools down, and then it comes back, right? So it's kind of like how our brains work, which sometimes people don't realize. It's like in that moment when it gets all overwhelming, we go blank, you know? The other part of that is where the worry, the fear that, oh, people are not going to understand how... why this happened, because you know, if it was me in another situation on another day, I would also wonder, hey, why you just get up and leave? You touch my hand and you just leave, right? So what helps you with that? You need so much courage and consistency to go through it. So in those moments, what helps you still stay true to you? And like when you are saying it, whether it's on a good day or a bad day, that hey, this is my my condition, right? Like to deal with possible negative reactions that you might get from that.
Muka tebal, you have to muka tebal gila bab. Gila babon, you have to muka tebal. You have absolutely no choice. And the thing is, again, you can only turn it into a weakness if you look at it as a weakness. That's the only way to go about it. You're setting a boundary. You can apologize after that. You can send a message to say, hi, I'm so sorry I had to walk out like that. I'll make it up to you and whatnot. That's all you need to do. You have nothing else to explain. I work in emceeing. Like you are at an event, for example, right?
Yeah.
Stuff like that you can't walk away from. And I've had panic attacks happen to me during the time that I am emceeing. If there's absolutely no way that you can get out of a situation when you are having that, have your coping mechanism by doing what? For example, I have Minyak Yui. This episode is not sponsored by Minyak Yui, by the way, but I love it. I have like 5 bottles everywhere in every single bag. But that's the whole point. You smell. You know what's that grounding technique? It's like you have 7 things that you can see, 6 things that you can touch, and
all your 5 senses.
Do all the 5 senses thing. So when you do all of that, you are able to come back to space, calm yourself, and try to distract yourself a little bit more. But if you absolutely need to take a step away from it, where you know it is beyond control, that is where you kena muka tebal. There's absolutely no choice out of it. If you're at a party, if you're at a dinner, you're at a hangout session and whatever, tak payah muka tebal lah, tak payah see face. What's the point? Because I've been in enough scenarios where I powered through a social situation. I went back so exhausted. It's tiring. Why put yourself through that situation for no reason?
I definitely relate, babe. Like I said, I've had those situations happen, and I think that's the beauty of age and the older we become. And ironically, when we became mothers, you know, like after a while, it's like, look, I'm just not going to compromise on this, you know, and it's not easy, like you said, because even when I do some of my speaker sessions, I get that too at the start, right? So, and you realize that, okay, sometimes even if you've done it 100 times, there's still going to be a little bit of that. But I think it's really about that courage and the commitment to continue despite the fear. Like if it's in a situation which, you know, involves work and stuff, but in a personal life, like, you do you, babe.
Yeah,
right?
man. Yeah, you gotta go.
And the more tebal it grows, then the more, you know, it's easier used, right?
Exactly.
But I think that's the very understated kind of, like, it's not really often talked about that. You need to really walk the talk, not just say you being authentic, all that, and then you don't really do it. Right?
No point to try to save face, man. Especially the Asian
that
thing.
part you have to look at the camera, you know.
Face. Must save face. Must jaga air muka. Like, we're all gonna go someday. We don't know when we're gonna go. Do you honestly want to live your life having pleasing everyone else, making sure that you made other people comfortable and not yourself?
But I think one more thing to add to that, as in, like, is where you fear what is the repercussions. But sometimes, like you said, it just takes a message maybe after that, or explaining it, someone who understands, right? Then you realize that it's not as fatal. But the only way for you to know that such things can happen, that there's different possibilities, is for you to actually go through it. You know, rather than being stuck like there and feeling like every time you just have to keep doing things or whatever all that you're not comfortable doing, and then you deal with the burnout, which is much more so for with your hyper focus, right?
I totally understand that. And like, I think one of the biggest fears is to not have someone understand you. I get that. I totally get, like, if someone you know you've gone through so much in your head, and bearing in mind this is all happening inside here, like super loud disco party of like, you suck, you're a horrible person, you're this, you're that, and whatever, and it's like going in there, like lingering. Even when you're in a good mood, it lingers here and there.
Yeah, for sure.
In your mind, you feel like no one can understand you. A lot of people can understand. A lot of people can empathize. You just have to get to the point where you want to talk about it and be completely open about it. Once you already start doing that, then you'll slowly get to the point where, is there something that I can do about it or not? Don't stay in the rut of victimization. I'm sorry to say, I'm going to put this out there. Please, for the life of God, like, victimizing yourself because you have, like, a diagnosis of sorts is one of the most detrimental things that you can possibly do to yourself. I catch myself doing it sometimes. I don't deny that. I will say, the moments that I do, I need someone to literally say, woman, get a life. It's not all about you all the time. And that's where you're like, come on, man, get out of it. Like, why do you have to be all like, think that this person might be like not into you, out to get you, or they're not supporting you, and you feel like there's people who are always like this and that. everyone has their thing.
Everyone has issues.
Everyone's definitely got issues. Okay, everyone's got
and the flavors.
Yes,
but
all
everyone has
different.
issues,
Yes,
okay?
yes. You know
no
what we
one
have to.
has a smooth, easy ride.
I think we need to make you a T-shirt for your merchandise. Everyone's got different flavors. Like that's just the way.
Flavors. Yeah, for sure.
But like that's the thing. That's the whole point. It's when you get to that point of like victimizing yourself. That's where you stay in the loop. Where when you're not willing to try to understand what is happening. And like that's why the blueprint works, like that mind map in your brain works, where if you are able to see and understand, here's a scenario, if you reacted or responded a certain way, what are the potential outcomes? Meaning you will know for a fact that they or people around you are only responding or reacting to what you say. So it's not them coming out to get you for the sake of coming out to get you. And maybe you don't mean to attack them, but they look at things very differently at the end of the day. So it's like, talk, respond, and all this. It's like,
but it's definitely a balance, right? There's the balance between you saying, speaking your truth, all that, and recognizing that, there's the possibilities that this could go well or it could not go well. But there's also the other part which you can't control for every single person's reaction.
True.
Right? Like, as in, they might still behave a certain way, whatnot. But that is also on them.
Yes, there you go.
right?
It's not a you thing. It's a them
It's not
thing.
always a you thing.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the whole point. Like, it's like you can't have control over something. And I think that's one of the things where generally people, when they need to have a sense of control for the chaos that, because overcompensating lah, there's chaos going on in your head, you have to control everything else. Everything has to be perfect.
sure,
Hence the perfectionism lifestyle of as a person who's diagnosed with something.
Yeah.
But ultimately, decide what works for you rather than just doing it for the sake of. And coming back to the foundation of who you are, why are you put on this planet? It's for you alone, it's not for anyone else. You are not like, you might be the superstar of your own, like, of your own show in your life, right? But ultimately we're far bigger than that. The planet is huge. We've got billions of people. It's not always about you. That you don't have to look too far within yourself and say, I'm stuck in this rut forever and no one is out there to help me out.
Yeah.
Reach out, man.
For sure. Just to wrap up, right? Like, in psychology, we've learned that, because you cannot always change when a situation is positive or negative, certain things that happen or so, right? That's why you always want to live a bit more of a values-aligned life, So when we're talking about values particularly, Diyana, tell me who you are. What are your values? What do you value, okay? Not what you do, but what do you value? So what's important to you? What would that be?
Okay lah. I mean, values per se, it sounds so branding, right? But like, I think, okay lah. So at the core of myself, I'm Diyana. I'm a human who seeks to inspire others to see good within themselves, within the capacity that I can. That is who I am at a foundation. And everything that I do is in service to that. It gives you that leeway and that freedom to understand within that statement, the values of, first and foremost, you're human, meaning you can't be perfect.
Yeah.
Second of all, want to inspire people to make them see the good in themselves, meaning you believe that there is good in others and you want to inspire people. And the last part, saying that you want to help within the capacity that you have, is me setting boundaries for myself and making sure that my space is still protected no matter what. I try to live by that as much as I possibly can in the things that I do. At any point that you stray, at any point that you feel like you are a little bit lost and confused in life, you just turn to that statement and go back to that and be like,
for sure.
Am I doing exactly that? No, I'm not. So how do I go back to it?
Yeah, course correct, they call it.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So that's it lah, basically.
So powerful. No tissue box here lah.
We didn't want to do promotion for free, right? So any tissue company that wants to promote.
Yeah, true. But yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for
I think
having
we
me.
discussed so many different things today, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully you found this helpful, useful, like it, or you have other thoughts, just let us know. We are both very open to feedback.
It's like, man, you gotta think what you gotta think. I mean, we're alright with it.
We do hope this was helpful.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.